Welcome back to Bantha Fodder. It's your manure mill, delivering you the shit post. I think I could say that on YouTube. I'm allowed to. I'm allowed to say things like that sometimes. Okay. What did I title the stream? 10 years later. You may have been a good smuggler, but now you're Bantha Fodder, says Grand Theft Auto. What do you think you are? Some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? What race do you think I'm supposed to stand in for, eh? Just because I'm a slaver and I tried to run a gambling operation? What do you think I am with my floppy nose? Little Annie? No part is worth two slaves. I basically used his voice for one of the puppets that we have. I called him Vlad. I said he's from Romania. And so he's always like talking about Eastern Bloc stuff. Well, I eat garbage. All right. So one of the things I reflected on is that I've been doing this format on the channel for 10 years. I actually started this channel quite a while before that. Not quite a while, a couple years before that. And I just did guitar content, pretty much, exclusively. Like YouTube, even in, like, I think I started the channel in 2013 or thereabouts. I might have uploaded a video in like 2012 that was like a bachelor party video that just figure out how to upload something to YouTube because I'd never done it before. And it was just like a random video of me running around with like my friend Mike and a couple of the friends of mine. It was like Mike's bachelor party. Lazarus was there. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And like my future brother-in-law was in the video too. So it was kind of funny. And then, you know, I was like, well, I had come to this point in my life. So I came to this point in my life where how should I put this? So I came to this point in my life where I decided I wasn't going to do music anymore. Now, I still do music, right? But I was really done with the music business, and in particular, classical guitar. I did a whole video on why I stopped playing classical guitar. You can watch that. That's been up for almost 10 years now. So I wrote a reflection on it a while back, and I'll probably publish that on my Substack, which is linked in the comments. And I'll probably do like a follow-up video on it just to talk about that. Because a lot changed since I recorded that. But there's a lot of reasons I wanted to get away from doing classical guitar. The music business was really, really bad during the Great Recession. It was really bad. Especially for, you know, I lived in Las Vegas at the time. And, you know, so I was able to find performance opportunities probably better than a lot of other people were able to find performance opportunities, but they had definitely gotten worse from their heyday in the early 2000s. And I remember 2008 was like this, this big crossing of a barrier kind of moment economically where I had been gigging like 4 nights a week, and within a couple of months, the economy turned around so quickly where I was at, which was Central California. It was Fresno at the time, that all the places that I used to play within those 6 months had closed up. So I used to play at restaurants and like art galleries and stuff. They all closed. They all ran out of business. Restaurant businesses in particular can be very volatile, and they're cash-hungry businesses. They're businesses that have a really high constant operating cost, and the operating cost doesn't kind of go up and down with the amount of people coming in, believe it or not. The food, there is a cost to food, but the cook shows up no matter what, you know, your wait staff shows up no matter what. So, you know, I remember I played at this Spanish restaurant, and the restaurant got bought by one of the waiters, and he wanted to be an entrepreneur. He felt like he knew how to run the restaurant, and he had big ideas for this restaurant, and it was just bad timing. The guy's name was Pepe. He was not a bad guy. He was a great guy, and he wasn't, in my opinion, like bad at running the restaurant or anything like that. But what he did is he bought the restaurant. Obviously, he had to take on debt to buy the restaurant, right? You have to take out a loan. And so when you take out a loan, you have to service that debt. That means all the operating expenses of the restaurant are happening, plus you're having to pay down that note. And he decided to expand it. He got into the next space over in the location he was at, and he had this idea of like this hip tapas bar. Now, if you were around in like 2005, 2006, yeah, you'd be really easy to float that idea because people were doing really, really well, right? There was not, there wasn't this feeling of like people don't have money to do stuff. Like they had money to do stuff. So in 2006, that would have been a really good idea. Yeah, like let's do a tapas bar and it'll be really hip, and there's gonna be a lot of money in especially in like pouring drinks and just packing the house with entertainment and stuff like that. But you run into a small problem, which is when the economy turns around, one of the first things that people start doing is they stop going out to eat. Now, this doesn't mean entertainment always gets bad in a down economy, but people make adjustments. So the recent, restaurants are still struggling to recover from COVID, right? Once people stop going to a restaurant, it takes them a while for them to rehabituate to like going out to eat all the time. People get habituated into doing certain things. And so going out to eat was one of those things. That restaurant, unfortunately, didn't make it. And so that's why I think that restaurant ended up closing. It wasn't like bad management or something. It was just bad timing, because in order to expand and do all that other stuff, you have to take on debt and just a little bit of a disruption in your cash flow. And all of a sudden you can't operate anymore. I remember there was other restaurants that closed at the time where people showed up to work and the restaurant was locked up. It was out of business. They had ceased operations. So there were several businesses that were like that. They were kind of high dollar restaurants. And for Central California, a high dollar restaurant is pretty volatile, because even though there's wealthy people there, it's not quite like LA where there's enough of a deep, like people are wealthy enough that they will always be okay. It wasn't like that. It was like, you basically had a lot of the upper middle class and upper class people in that area were all business owners. So when their businesses do poorly, they had to cut back on all their own consumption. They were all proprietors. So basically everything dried up really quickly. But I persisted. I kept on. I kept doing the music thing. And so when I started the channel, it was to do music instruction. And my idea was I want to make a bunch of videos on how to play classical guitar, because there were virtually none of them on, and they were all bad. The ones that they were there, they were bad. They just didn't have good information. People hadn't figured out YouTube yet, and they hadn't figured out YouTube guitar stuff. Now there's a bunch of guitar instruction channels that are probably really good. Every time I see one, I'm like, this wouldn't help. This doesn't help me learn, but I can imagine it would help somebody that's a beginning to intermediate player, like learn to play a song, which is what they really want to do. So there wasn't like that stuff wasn't around at that point in time. So I was just showing like, putting up my sheet music for this and like showing, here's how you finger everything, right? I was just going through a bunch of classical stuff and showing how to play it so that people who didn't have an instructor could like get this information. And I got people, who I still like on rare occasions, people will ask me to do lessons and stuff. But during that time, I was actually getting a little bit of business of people wanting me to do lessons. I had one kid I remember who was just like, I need you to help me prepare these pieces. And I recognized it right away. I'm like, you're trying to get into Juilliard? And I was like, you don't play classical guitar yet. Like, you shouldn't try to do this Juilliard thing. This is just it's not a good idea. You're not going to get in. So most of your effort's not going to be worth it. And then Juilliard is not going to help you as a classical guitarist, like land a gig. If you were a concert violinist, getting into Juilliard basically can make your entire life. Juilliard is something that's completely 100% worth it if you play violin, or if you play cello, or if you are an orchestral instrument player. Juilliard will help you to make those connections. Basically, you will get a gig from going to Juilliard. Or an opera singer. I had a friend who went to Juilliard who was an opera singer and did it professionally, and it was great, So he made all those connections. Same thing with like Berklee College of Music. I had several students that went to Berklee after they studied with me, and they had various amounts of success after the fact, but mostly it was like you make connections, and so you're able to get gigs. But like going to Juilliard as a classical guitarist, when you don't play classical guitar already, it's like dude, you needed to be on this list like 4 years ago. And also you need to be studying with someone who has more connections than me to like get you in at Juilliard. You're like 3 steps removed. But I remember that moment because it made a big impact on me where I was like, am I really helping people with this kind of thing? Right. I want to help people to achieve their artistry, but everybody's kind of buying into this breaking down system of like, I got to get into the school and the school will make me good, or the school will give me the connections I need. And it's like, for most of us, we're just not in that, right? You're not going to be in that stream where you can just have the easy life. And that's just how it is. Like if you're a classical guitarist, there's not a big reason to do all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to share my knowledge. That's what it was about, right? Let me share my knowledge with you. Let me teach you how to play guitar. And so I did that for a while. 2015 rolls around, and I was really busy. My son was born in 2015. When he was 5 days old, I had to go back to work, and because it was a new job, right? I couldn't get off from that. Because like Family Medical Leave Act, that doesn't work for people who haven't began work. Okay. So, I had to go to work, and I was a band director. So I was working really long hours while I had a newborn son at home, and, my wife struggling with that. And so I kind of fell off from making a lot of guitar content. I did continue to make content that was basically directed towards my high school students at the time, which is like, I made content on how to use this software that we're using in class for like the electronic music class, how to use, I was using a thing called Audio Tool, which I haven't looked at in forever, but it might be fun to go back and look at it. It's like almost like a virtual synthesizer, like pedal board thing. How to use Soundtrap, which is like a online DAW. I think that's still around. So I did a lot of videos on how to use software, how to use Reaper and stuff like that, how to play guitar, stuff that was just really generated towards my high school students. Like, if you didn't know this, you can go and look at this on your Chromebook, and then it will show you how to do this thing. But in 2015, a movie came out, and that movie was called Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. And I went and saw it with my brother-in-law, and I really did not like it. And I had this moment where, like, I'm watching the movie, and I'm just like, it was almost like an episode 1 moment, but not quite. Episode 1 was this thing where I got out of the movie, I'm like, I don't think I like that. But it was worse than this. It was like, this is really stupid. Like episode 1, I thought there was like all these cringe moments, but like episode 7 was just straight up like bad. Like, it was just really bad. I've done reviews on it. Just really poorly written, like completely half-assed. Like, I got this idea of George was actually telling a story with episode 1, but episode 7, it's like, this is just the first movie again, but with a girl and bad, with a setup from like Knights of the Old Republic. We got to find a map to find Luke. Really stupid stuff. The same setup from the first movie, the same plot, like everything was the same, but you had a girl boss who didn't need any help from anyone, didn't need to get broken out. She breaks herself out of prison instead of being broken out. Like, just all of this crazy Mary Sue stuff. And people watched this review. I felt so compelled that I recorded this review, and people watched it. And I was the first time I got like 1,000 views on a YouTube video. And then it was like 5,000 views. And then it was 50,000 views. And then it was 100,000 views. And then it was like 300,000 views or something, right? So I got all of this attention on this video. And because at this point in time, creatively, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. I had already decided to give up music. That's why I made the channel, was basically to be like, let me communicate this knowledge, because I'm not going to keep doing this. And I don't know, I don't have any reason to like try to milk people for money. I'm just going to put it up there, and it's a way to kind of have some personal communion with my past as a musician. I'm a writer now. So around 2000, actually earlier than that, like 2011, 2010, I decided I want to get into writing. And I started practicing a lot more and coming up with a lot more writing ideas. I wrote a bunch of screenplays with my roommate around 2012 to 2013. I think around 2012 was when we wrote them. We got those out. We were working with like a production company in LA. We were looking at moving there and doing all this kind of stuff. Eventually that kind of falls apart for reasons that aren't really going to make any sense to like talk about in a video. I'm thankful for everything that happens in my life because I have a great life where I am and with what I'm doing, and I didn't really need to do the Hollywood thing, even though I missed out on most of those opportunities, basically for reasons that don't have anything to do with me and have to do with other people, because the connections, like I'm like one connection removed, so it's hard for me to just make connections when I'm like relying on other people's connections, if that makes any sense. Anyway, so yeah, I was working with a Hollywood production company. I moved out of Las Vegas, moved to LA. I was doing the writing thing, right? I'm like, I'm a writer. And I wrote books. And so I had written a couple of books by the time this movie came out. And I was not really able to get them published. And the reason was that the book that I really wanted to publish, well, I had written some books that were bad. So I wasn't going to publish those. Those needed to be revised. But the book that I really wanted to publish was called Muramasa Blood Drinker. And I have copies of it around here. Let me find one. Well, I thought I did. I know I have some copies like lurking. Oh, here's one. Here we go. All right, here it is, right? So people encouraged me. They're like, hey, you just publish it yourself. You know, people that were watching me. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to learn how to be a publisher. So I did it. And in 2016, I did my first like real publication of a book, which was Muramasa Blood Drinker. And then I just continued down that path and kept publishing books because I was like, all right, now that I know how to do this and I know how to make a couple bucks doing it, let's do it. You know, let's keep doing it. So I had written that book I think I wrote that book in 2014 is when I wrote that book. So anyway, I had transitioned to that and I'm like, well, Star Wars gives me an opportunity because I looked at Star Wars from the perspective of a writer who's even worked in Hollywood and worked with producers. And it's like, it's bad. It's bad on so many levels. Like the production is okay, right? Like the special effects and stuff. I wasn't crazy about them, but it didn't look bad. It wasn't a bad looking movie. It had some cool looking sets. It had some, the aesthetics, of course, the reason I kind of shit on the aesthetics are like they just took the original trilogy aesthetics and just reused them. Like they didn't show anything new or interesting. There was no new or interesting locales really. That's not true. There's like the bar, like the Maz's bar planet or whatever. That's kind of cool. Like there's some cool sets, but they mostly were just like, it's stormtroopers again. It's X-Wings again. It's Star Destroyers again. It's everything from the OT again. You know, nothing really new or interesting there. But the writing was really bad. It was really just a terribly written piece of shit. And I was so upset about it. And I remember walking out of the theater and I talked to my brother-in-law, Matt. I'm like, Matt, what do you think? He's like, I thought that was amazing. I was like, I thought that was shit. I thought that was garbage. So he was like, what? I'm like, okay. And I broke it down. I was just like, you have this Mary Sue character who's just an awful character, has no personality, no reason to do anything. There's nothing that stops her from doing anything in the movie. She's completely flawless and perfect. The movie is just a point-for-point ripoff of the first movie with nothing different other than like the set pieces. You even have like Obi-Wan's death is just replaced with Han Solo's death. Like if you were to line up the first movie in Force Awakens, every beat just lines up. It's just a beat for beat. Like they took all the story beats from the first one. Story beat is like there's an event that happens. Like Obi-Wan dies to Darth Vader, right? He actually like disappears, but we always thought Darth Vader killed him by touching him with his lightsaber and he just got obliterated when we were kids. But anyway, there's the death scene. So Obi-Wan dies. He kind of sacrifices himself. So Han just does that at the exact same point in the movie. Like the exact same point. You have a Death Star, but this one's even bigger. It's a whole planet. And it's going to suck up the sun and blow up the stuff. So I did that. And so that kind of changed the direction of what my YouTube channel was. So I'm like, okay, people want me to talk about this kind of stuff. I'm going to talk about it. But an interesting thing happened, which was 2 years later. they came out with, so I did a bunch of writing videos, and that's just kind of the thing I did. I'm like, let me tell you all the lessons I learned and all my thoughts about this and all the things I learned either as a student or just through School of Hard Knocks, School of Hard Life, learning what stories suck and which ones don't through my own scholarship. 2 years later, they came out with The Last Jedi, right? The Last Jedi was this one where people realized that new Star Wars was bad. That was The Last Jedi. Is people realized it was bad. Now, I had seen Rogue One at that point and said it was really bad, and it was bad. I still think Rogue One is actually the worst of the new Star Wars movies. And no one shares my opinion with that, but I had this like great moment. So let me back up a bit, because Last Jedi was where people realized Star Wars was bad. But before that, I was getting death threats because of this bad review for Force Awakens. I had people threatening to find me and kill me. I had people calling my work and trying to get me fired, saying I was like, I don't remember the things they were saying, you know, whatever, I'm a Nazi or I'm evil or something, right? So pointing out the technical deficiencies in a piece of popular fiction makes me a Nazi. And this is where I realized that people are hypnotized and people are also religiously attached to Star Wars. They have an attachment to Star Wars that is just a full-on religion. And so for me to come out and say this movie sucks is like for me to come out and say that there's no God or that like, you know, Christ was bad or something. You know, it's offensive to them on a deep level because their life and their identity is built around Star Wars. And it's built around Star Wars being good. And it's built about the feelings that they feel when they watch Star Wars. Their feelings really matter. It really matters a lot for people, how they feel when they watch a movie. And so for me to disturb it and say, actually, this movie's really bad, then it's like, are my feelings wrong? And it's like, they are wrong, but I don't hate you for like liking Force Awakens. It had a lot of flashy lights, and if that's what excites you, that's great. I like Captain EO. I like watching Captain EO too, right? But at least it has some good music. So yeah, it was a wake up to like how the internet works when you have even a tiny bit of exposure. So when people are like, Charlie Kirk got murdered, and it's like, that doesn't surprise me at all. Like I said, the difference is that I have, you know, an audience of 50,000 and he has an audience of 5 million, right? And that message is even bigger, right? If I'm getting death threats because Star Wars sucks, and I'm having people try to ruin my life because Star Wars sucks, and I'm just a nobody, and at the time I had like 4,000 subscribers, then of course it's going to be worse if you are actually challenging people's like deep religiously held beliefs, such as transgenderism, which is a religiously held belief. And I've gone over the fact that it's a cosmological belief in a soul that's separate from the body, that's creation is different from your body, things like that. There's a whole religious set of beliefs that go with that. So if you're offensive to that, then yeah, you're a threat who must be eliminated. People are insane. And Star Wars fans are pretty crazy as far as fandoms go. They're much worse than Star Trek fans. I never got death threats from Star Trek fans because Star Trek fans are nerds that don't really have a religious belief in their Trek. I'm not offending them by pointing out that Star Wars sucks. They didn't grow up watching Star Wars or Star Trek on their VHS on Saturday mornings in 1988, which is what a lot of these people did. So I don't think too many of those death threats were like serious. It was more like, can I scare this guy enough to make him shut up? I think it would be funny if I could scare him and make him shut up. And then I wouldn't. No, I'm not going to do that. I don't really believe you, and that sort of thing. So Last Jedi, however, became popular to hate the new Star Wars. And that's when I noticed that like people are like, did you see this review? And I'm like, I would watch it and I'm like, this person's just saying, they just watched my video and said the same thing like 3 weeks later. Like, why would I watch any of these reviews on Last Jedi? They're literally just saying the same things I said day one, months after the fact. There were people who made a whole year worth of content on this. And then anytime I mention Star Wars, people were like, oh, all you talk about is Star Wars. I'm like, I made 50 videos you didn't watch on all kinds of things, like how to write books, how to publish things, how to format your manuscripts, how to play guitar, how to use Reaper, how to use Ableton. How do you pronounce it? So how to use this stuff, right? I've done so much content. I've done like 1,000 videos at this point. I've done just a ridiculous amount of content, but the people who are really focused on Star Wars, all they really care about is, have you talked about Star Wars? And so 10 years after the fact, someone posted on that review this week. They're like, oh man, it's like, I remember this review, it made a big difference. And I'm like, I'm glad about that. I kind of wish I had never talked about Star Wars, because then all of my audience growth would have been directed organically towards the things I want to do. Instead, I got focused for a couple years on doing movie reviews because those would get consistent views for a while. But I realized really quickly that people want me to shit on every movie. And if I point out anything positive about the way a movie was produced, or the way it's experienced, or the way it's meant to be experienced, like with Avengers Endgame or with Black Panther or something, then people get really upset, because then I realized the audience I had attracted viewed everything through this lens of cultural politics and mass media. That's the lens I'm going to talk about. So everything was either a message for us to us, or was a message for them to them. And nothing was a piece of art that could be evaluated on its own. And I have like a whole rubric for how I evaluated movies and how I evaluate music. And I've posted that stuff and I've talked about it a lot, right? So people are like, how could you give this movie a 61, a 6 out of 10 or something, right? I'm like, that's a D. Where, in what world is a 6 out of 10 a D? In every school you've ever freaking attended. But you don't remember that because you're stupid, maybe, right? But like, seriously, a 60% is a D. So I think it's a 1 out of 10. I'm like, a 1 out of 10 is like, it's not a movie. A 1 out of 10 is like, it's a blue screen with people with voices telling you to kill yourself or something. That's a 1 out of 10 movie. Like, it's not actually in the movie. Like, a minimum amount of achievement in all these levels gets you like 4 or 5 out of 10 and gets you 40 to 50%. That's still an F, right? I still gave these movies Fs, but because I acknowledged they did this thing well, it's like, you are a sellout. Where's your Disney bucks? It's like, I wish I had Disney bucks. I'm just trying to evaluate something objectively for you. Not even objectively for you, just like with a rubric, trying to point out things that are done well and things that can be improved on, things that I would avoid if I was a writer, all that kind of stuff. So like, I really wish I had never talked about Star Wars. Never mentioned it, never done a review of it, and just, I stay in your lane is terrible advice, but I wish I had like focused more on the things I was really passionate about. And then, the audience would have been smaller, but it would have been more organically pointed towards what I wanted to do. Because you end up in this certain place where like, I'm going to watch a movie that I know is going to suck so that I can then do a review of it to then make money off of it. And I realized really quickly there's like a break point in this where if you're not getting enough views for a movie review, it doesn't pay for the ticket. It's not like I get free screenings. So if a movie review is not getting 10 or 20,000 views, it's really not worth doing. And I'll still do them because I care about the craft. But if it's usually a movie that I'm watching, it's on a streaming service that I'm already paying for in some way. So it's not like I'm spending a bunch of money to go out and see a movie. And because of my children being so young, I couldn't go see these movies with my kids. I couldn't go see them with my wife. I couldn't share this experience with anyone except my online audience. And it became really frustrating when like my online audience was viewing everything through this one lens and not able to really understand anything about art. The word postmodernism got thrown around a lot, and I'm like, yeah, let's talk about postmodernism. And the people using it, they got it from Jordan Peterson, so they had no idea what it means. And they're like, the problem is postmodernism. I'm like, postmodernism is kind of a problem, but not in the way that you think, because you don't understand the ethos of postmodernism. Postmodernism is really about the like subjective experience and how like anything can be art. That's postmodernism. That's the ethos, is like challenging the boundaries of art. That's what postmodernism always has, like a meta layer, but people don't understand that. They think postmodernism means like, lesbianism good or something weird like that. So, yeah. It's one of those things that happens when, when you get that kind of exposure, and I'll get to the comments in a minute, but I kind of want to like finish this thought, that you become responsive to the robot. Now, the audience is giving me like, you guys are real and you're talking, But the robot is like, I'm showing this video to a lot of people. You should do more things like this. And so how you want to respond to those hints, those instructions, that reinforcement matters, right? And so if you find yourself doing a lot of things that you don't enjoy, that's fine if you're getting paid a lot of money. But as soon as you're not getting paid money to do it, then there's no reason to do it. And I remember my channel got shadow banned in, I think, 2019 was when I got really shadow banned hard. I'd gotten up to like 45,000 subscribers, right? Right now I'm like at 48,000. So you have to think that like in 7 years, I only gained like 3,000 subscribers. It's like, that's pretty bad, right? So I got up to like 45,000 subscribers, and then boom, no views on any videos. I went from making $1,000 a month just kind of doing YouTube to like $150 a month. It was really weird. It was like, oh, okay, well, I guess you don't want me to do anything. So I just didn't quite know how to respond to that, other than to like, I massively increased my output. So I made a lot more videos to make up the difference in views. And then I just put out a lot more stuff. I just was publishing a lot of books. Those couple of years, I was just throwing a lot of books out for people to buy. And so that kind of made up the difference. But, over the long term, it didn't. But I think if I had never talked about Star Wars, I probably wouldn't have gotten shadow banned because it became a political topic. By 2019, Star Wars sucks was a political topic. And there was just no way to escape that. So through that kind of mechanical reinforcement, you start talking about things that you normally don't care about, right? Like, I don't really care about Marvel movies. I don't care about them, right? I stopped caring really about comic book superheroes in the 90s when comics started to really suck around 1997. And really before that, but 1997 was like when Marvel went bankrupt and things. So I hadn't cared about this stuff. And like, Marvel movies are cheesy and dumb. And they're really kind of spectacle movies. They're movies for spectacle. And you kind of have to not be a person with high standards for like acting or writing, really, to enjoy them. They're just for, if you take a step back, you're like, everybody's in these dumb little costumes. Don't we all agree this is really silly? It kind of makes sense on a 4-color strip like what you had in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but it's just weird on the screen. It's always felt weird. Superhero movies have always felt a little weird to me. I can enjoy them for what they are. I can kind of step outside of myself and be like, I can see this from the perspective of somebody who really enjoys this, and that's how I'm going to evaluate it. And that was my review of Endgame, I think. I called it a capstone experience, is what I called it. I'm like, this is a movie that's designed to cap off all of this investment for people who are mega fans of what this is. And that's what it was. So the plot was not very good. It had all of these moments like, remember this, remember that, characters having feeling moments and those sorts of things. We got all those moments, and then we closed off, we killed Tony Stark, we ended it. And I was like, I never want to see another Marvel movie after that one. And I don't think I have. I think I stuck to my guns and I said, that's the end. It's going to suck after this. And everyone's like, you're an idiot. It's going to be great. I'm like, nope, it's going to suck. And I was completely 100% vindicated. Everything I've ever said has been completely vindicated, I feel like. I have people that find my old videos and be like, you were completely vindicated on this. Live in the pod and eat bugs. You were vindicated on this. The low IQ thing, you were vindicated. The Star Wars thing, you were vindicated. I was vindicated over and over again, meaning I was right. I was right about how these things were going to go, but no one wants to believe it because they live in this moment where the robot is making them feel these things and they can't step outside of that and think outside of it. So yeah, a big part of me wishes I'd never talked about Star Wars. Eventually I might have talked about it as a writer, and that's what encouraged me to talk about it anyway. It's like, I just felt compelled to talk about it because I was in this mode as a writer and I just really wanted to vent. I'm like, how could you spend $200 million and make something so bad? It was actually mind-boggling because I'd never seen that amount of money dropped on a movie to produce something so bad. We thought Waterworld was bad. And Waterworld is amazing compared to The Force Awakens. And Waterworld was the most expensive movie ever made at that point. And it just, that was our standard in the 90s. Like, Waterworld sucks. Now, if you came out with Waterworld now, people were like, this is the best thing I've ever seen. This movie's amazing. It was kind of the same thing with like Alita. It's like Alita is great because of our low standards. Avatar is great because of our low standards. I thought Avatar sucked when it came out, but people's standards had already really slipped by that point in time, and they've gotten so much worse now. I think people are really impressed by competence. I said this about a Minions movie. I'm like, it's merely competent, but competent is better than 90% of the things that come out now. Like, the quality of what that industry puts out has slid down the slope so much. And the big culprit is writing. Writing is where they suck. It's not the special effects. It's not the cinematography. It's not even the acting, although there's some really bad actors. You guys have heard me talk about, Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya Into the Ground and how bad they are at what they do. It's the writing. The writing really sucks. It's really bad. So that's what it is. No one knows how to write a damn story. People can't be original. They're just... I think Brian Niemeyer said it like, it's like kids playing with toys. They got their Star Wars toys out and they played with them, and that's the movie you're watching, is a bunch of kids playing with their Star Wars toys. And the Rey character is a little self-insert. I'm this person and I'm going to use the Force to do this. Like, it's like watching 6-year-olds play. I'm using the Force to do this, and now I'm using the Force to do that. And that's really how those movies come off. Last Jedi is a hate letter to Star Wars, and for me, it actually kind of resonates. It's like, I get why you hate Star Wars and Star Wars fans, because these were the people who wanted me dead for saying Star Wars sucks. So I understand that now. I understand the people versus George Lucas, right? From the other side, which is like, these people are deranged. These people are off the farm. They need religion bad. And their religion is Star Wars. They're ruining their lives by obsessing over Star Wars so much. It's really pathetic. I have a pathos for these people. It's like, I'm so sorry for your existence. I'm so sorry that you live in this world where Star Wars matters to you so much. I grew up with Star Wars. I like it. I like Star Wars. There's not that much else to say. My son likes Star Wars. It was really fun to go see Revenge of the Sith this year and to go watch that. But damn, dude, like, it's just a movie, cultural phenomenon. It's an important movie. It shouldn't affect how you feel about yourself in any given day. You shouldn't base your identity or your emotional state around being excited for something to come out. But that's the way I feel like a lot of my generation was in the late 2000s to early 2010s. You had all these childless millennials. Now, I was childless in 2013. I was a childless. I'm a Gen Y, right? So I didn't have a kid till I was, how old was I? 2015. I was 32. I think I just turned 32 when my son was born. So I didn't have kids until my 30s. I should have had kids earlier, but the economics and the life, and I wasn't with my wife. Like, things just didn't work out that way, and that's okay. But their life became, what's the next video game that comes out? That's why Mass Effect 3 was such a big deal. Like, the badness of Mass Effect 3. I don't even think Mass Effect 3 is a bad game, right? Mass Effect 3 is a good game, but it wasn't good enough. There's like the first great disappointment of the 2010s was Mass Effect 3, where people were like hyped for a thing and they came out and they were like disappointed. Everyone in my generation, they had this hype cycle. They were hyped about the next big thing, hyped about the next Warcraft expansion, hyped about the next Call of Duty game, hyped about the next Star Wars movie, hyped about the next Marvel movie. Everything was about this media hype. And it just wasn't that way in the 90s. You had Star Wars mega fans that camped out to buy tickets, but mostly it was like, it's Sunday afternoon. Do you want to see a movie? Yes, you go and you watch Indiana Jones. Oh, I heard Indiana Jones is out. Let's go watch that. You just didn't really, it wasn't this thing that like sucked into your life. You bought games because they were on the shelf. You weren't, unless you were really excited about like one kind of product. It was rare for hype to be a big thing in the 90s, right? Like, people weren't really hyped. Like, people weren't hyped for Quake to come out till Quake came out and people played it and it was good. If that makes any sense. Doom was like a shareware title. And I love the hype, actually. I love the hype. The hype was exciting. It was exciting to have like a launch of it was exciting to have a launch of a game system like Xbox 360 or a game like Halo 3 and have people be excited, and it's really good. That was the last time that we had the hype kind of match the product. Anyway, let me read some chats. So yeah, that's the whole thing, right? Is I got exposed, and I've come to understand culture a lot deeper as a result of that. But I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, because it's been a lot of up and downs, and I got a lot of abuse over the years from people that just take all of this stuff too seriously and aren't really able to communicate with me or be on my level. Maybe it's like Dunning-Kruger effect. Like, people aren't as smart as me, so they don't understand what I'm saying. I'm not sure. Backstory is cool to hear. I've only been following you about 3 years. Well, thank you. I don't know how to describe it, but I never liked the aesthetics of Force Awakens. They're just reused. It's like a bad imitation of the original, but more plastic looking, if that makes sense. Maybe it's because we were used to watching the original on a VHS, and if you go and you watch it in Blu-ray, the sets look a lot more fake than they did when we were kids, watching it on grainy film or whatever else. So there's probably some truth to that like there's some nostalgia goggles when we look back on how real everything looked. You look at it on Blu-ray, you're like, it's definitely plywood and like glued on plastic pieces. It's been about 10 years since I found your channel. Awesome, Jared. Thank you. I found your Force Awakens video around the time I realized I was just faking liking the Force Awakens. Now, I would say I was vindicated. This was a vindication, as I went on a camping trip with my son's little Boy Scout. It's not Boy Scouts, but it's another organization, because Boy Scouts are woke, so we don't do that. Every person, every dad there was like, yes, new Star Wars sucks. We hate it. I'm like, yes, I'm vindicated, and they weren't even aware. They were saying the things that I had talked about back then that had just kind of like permeated into the cultural landscape. And I was like, that's great. I didn't even mention that, like, oh yeah, I'm like the OG Star Wars hater guy. But I'm like, yeah, it really sucked. I agree with you. They still kind of liked Rogue One, and I still think Rogue One is the worst of the batch, because just for like production levels, it's not a good story. It's not structured well. The reshoots stick out. It's got this tacked on Darth Vader thing that doesn't fit in anywhere. The main thing is it's unnecessary. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't really tell us a meaningful story, and it doesn't give us any kind of meaningful conclusion to anything. It's just not a very well thought out movie, I think. And I would love to see the director's cut, actually. So the director made the movie, and then the studio deleted 40% of it and reshot it because they didn't believe in it. It didn't have enough fan service and stuff. There's even stuff in the preview that was like looked cool, but it didn't show up in the movie. It's interesting. Jared says, I did like the theater experience with my friends and family, but The Force Awakens as a whole was not and is not good. I'll just stick with George's movies. I like the first 5 minutes of Force Awakens for sure, and then it just like went downhill from there. It's crazy how many movies get by purely on aesthetics. Aesthetics are great, and it's awesome if a movie can get by purely on aesthetics. It really is. I think the aesthetics of Blade Runner do a crap ton of heavy lifting, because I think if you dig deep into the way Ridley Scott tells the story of Blade Runner, you may find that it's more flawed than you originally thought. You may not find the writing is not quite as sharp as you like to believe. There's the ambiguity partly comes out of just the way that it's done, but the aesthetics work so well. The mood, the atmosphere, the music, like the experience of Blade Runner is more than just the writing and the plot. It really is. Force Awakens felt awesome in the theater, but by the time I got to my car, the high wore off and I wasn't happy with it. Yeah. Episode 7 was lazy plagiarism, at least a little fun. Episode 8 was just a turd being thrown in your face. Episode 8 was really about how you, the audience, are bad for liking Star Wars, and how Star Wars sucks. Right? Am I wrong? Am I wrong with that assessment, or am I right? I think I'm correct with that. There was a meta message of Star Wars is stupid. And that kind of resonated with me. I didn't hate that message because I had dealt with, for 2 years, I dealt with people just like online hate. Most people are not used to having people fling insults at them all day, every day for years. It kind of sucks, right? It sucks. Sucks as much as episode 1 does. Rogue One is the worst at Disney. I haven't heard that. Yeah. Don't like a film, you're a Yahtzee. I don't know what Yahtzee means. Yeah. There's a lot of films I like. Or if I think a film is mediocre, but I point out all the good things, people get angry about it. Shame I didn't know about your channel when TFA came out. I really didn't like it either, even on the first watch. Like, I think people were looking for someone else to like share in the experience of this movie isn't good. I think that's why negativity for that was so viral, is that there were so many people who liked it. And you're like, what's wrong with you? Why did you like this? Same thing with Dances with Smurfs, with Avatar. Like, I went to see Avatar and like everyone was like, that was amazing. I was like, that was stupid. That was dumb as hell. How did you like that movie? And they're like, well, and it basically came down to, it was beautiful to look at. I'm like, it was just a CG mess to me. It didn't really look super beautiful. I thought the aliens looked dumb. And I thought the plot was stupid. I thought the setup was stupid. I thought it was insulting, right? Like, I thought everything about it was dumb. It was kind of a hate letter to human beings, right? That's what Avatar is. So The Last Jedi is a hate letter to Star Wars fans. Avatar is a hate letter to human beings, to the entire human race. That's what Avatar was. And I was aware of that message. It's like, okay, I got it. We're all bad people. We're so bad. We're so bad that a good person will be good by escaping from the entire human race. Did you guys not pick up on that message? It's so misanthropic. It's so misanthropic. It's literally a misanthropic movie. It's a movie about how human beings are bad and should die. It should be destroyed. And it makes sense from boomers, right? Because boomers bought into like global warming. They were the first generation. They didn't have to be indoctrinated into global warming. They just believed it because it meant people were bad, and they liked that. Part of why I lied to myself about enjoying The Force Awakens is because those I went to the movie with enjoyed it, and their enjoyment sort of rubbed off of me beyond the theatrical experience. Yeah, I mean, I can get that. I can look into another person's perspective and I can see why you enjoyed this movie. It had a lot of the things you wanted in it. If you were Gen Y, or if you grew up in the 80s, then you wanted these certain things. Like the big generational divide between Gen Y, the 80s kids, and millennials, the 90s kids, really is whether or not you liked the prequels. If you were a millennial, you liked the prequels. You were 10 or whatever when the first one came out, or younger. So you didn't have this built up expectation. You didn't have all this lore in these video games you've been playing for 10 plus years, hyping you up to see the next Star Wars movie. It was just an experience you accepted. And so you liked all the good parts of it and didn't really care that much about the bad parts. Whereas people, if you were born in 1980, then you freaking hated you hated episode 1. Episode 1 was like the antichrist kind of feeling. But again, now I understand why people had those feelings, is because Star Wars had become part of their identity. In the 90s, everybody was searching for an identity. And we had these sort of packaged corporate identities, and people are not aware of it now, but I'll pontificate on it. I know there was a super chat from Sound Engraver, and I appreciate that. I'll get that in just a second. Let me pontificate. I just want to tell you I haven't forgotten. I'm just going with my thoughts here. Are you a punk? Oh, well, you got to wear Vans shoes, and you got to do the skateboarding, and you got to listen to this Green Day shit, and you got to cut your hair at the bowl cut, and wear the baggy pants, and that's what you do. Every identity had this little packaged dress code and attitude that went with it. Oh, you have to think this about the government. You have to think this about music. You have to think this about other people. You have to do these drugs, right? Like there was this whole package of skater, where it's like you have to smoke pot every day, and you have to listen to like these 3 bands, and you have to ride a skateboard, and you have to believe this about the world. Like everything was packaged. And so Star Wars fan was a packaged identity. It was a corporate identity. Just like nerd became a packaged corporate identity in I'd say around 2010 is when we start to have nerd culture as a identity. I'm a nerd. I'm going to get my nerd on by going to Star Wars. You're gonna be a nerd by going to the most popular film franchise in the history of the human race. That's what's nerdy. What's nerdy is going to something so popular every human's seen it 20 times. There's nothing nerdy about liking Star Wars. It's the most popular thing on planet Earth. So I'm a nerd. I like Pokemon. Pokemon is the most valuable franchise on Earth. There's nothing special about enjoying Pokemon. Pokemon is for everyone. The Pope liked Pokemon. Let me get to the super chat. You aren't fake. That's why we come back. Thank you. I appreciate that super chat. I didn't read it. I just saw it pop up. Rogue One could never possibly overcome that Tarkin Leia CGI. That was bad to me, but that wasn't what made it bad. It was the whole. It was the product as a whole. That was so badly done and embarrassing. Whoever saw that and thought it was okay to leave it in, no excuse. Not to mention disrespectful to the dead. I agree completely with that, but that's not why I hated it. That's a great moment there. That's like it. Rogue One was about fans. We're going to look at fans. It was a marketing exercise. I think that's why I'm so offended by it. I don't like marketing exercises. I think art should be good. I think art should communicate what the artist wants to communicate. That's why Revenge of the Sith is so freaking good, is that it's what George Lucas wanted. It's George Lucas's heart kind of coming out on the screen. And that's why it's great. It's great because it's George's, and it's not just George's, but everybody else who worked on the movie, the people who shot the movie, the directors, the photographers, the actors. It's all of their passion, like coming out on the screen, kind of head, captained by George Lucas, but you could feel the passion, and it's just something you don't get with a lot of modern movies. That's why Revenge of the Sith is so good. I think it's become over time like my favorite Star Wars movie because of its sort of singular vision and what it accomplishes with that kind of the heart that's in the movie and what it's about, the themes. Anyway, I digress. Rogue One was really about fan service. It's like fans were excited, like, this fills in a plot hole. I'm like, there's no plot hole. It's like, why would they have this tiny vulnerability? Because it's insignificant. They have to vent, presumably they'd have to vent their nuclear exhaust or whatever their energy source is. It doesn't matter. There was no problem with the first movie of like, there's a tiny little hole we're going to shoot a torpedo into, and maybe we'll blow up the Death Star, but we're probably all going to die. So let's just try. And then you have almost divine intervention that allows Luke to like blow up the Death Star. It's about the heroism of Luke basically flying against all odds to do something that was impossible and being able to do it. It didn't matter that, and it's like we're going to have an engineer specifically design a tiny hole that you can shoot a torpedo into to blow up the Death Star. And people going, it's dumb that you could just be blown up that way. It's like, you're dumb for thinking that, right? It's a plot. It's a fantasy movie. And it totally makes sense in the context of everything that's there. They even say that, like, they wouldn't see small one-man fighters as any kind of threat to this giant battle station that's as big as a moon. Why would they? They wouldn't, right? It all made sense. So it was an unnecessary movie. It was full of fan service. It's like, it was basically like, we want to make a movie for the mega fans that want extended universe stuff. They want like former clone troopers. They want all this tie-in kind of stuff. Whereas the episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are about characters and character drama. And Rogue One's really not about that. There are characters, but there's not a lot of drama with them. It's mostly like, they're kind of doing an Ocean's 11 in space kind of thing, which they did again with Solo. It's almost like a heist movie, but they just kind of don't execute it well. It was really boring. Oh, we're going to have the politics of the rebellion. No one cares about that. That's not exciting. So they reshot 40% of the movie with like, the Tarkin Leia stuff and the Vader stuff. And it feels really out of place given what's there. I bet you Rogue One, I would probably reappraise if they came up with a Rogue One Rogue edit that was like the director's original vision. I bet you I would like it. I bet you I would give it at least a 7 out of 10. As it was like a 5 out of 10 movie for me because it was really boring and pointless and those sorts of things. So on the meta level, this just exists to have fan service for me. That doesn't make for a good movie. And when I say it's bad, people respond like, what about that Darth Vader scene? I'm like, what about it? It was freaking stupid. It was stupid and unnecessary. It served no purpose in the plot. What about this? That didn't serve any purpose. What about this? They just list cool things that they wanted to see. That's why they made it. So it was a marketing exercise. Disney was completely on point to make Rogue One. They were completely correct to make it as a marketing exercise to make some money. Totally. But I think it's a shitty movie. And yeah, I don't like bringing back dead people. I'm not into that. Star Wars: A New Hope is my favorite movie. That's probably the best one because it's very complete. Makes a lot of sense. But I think Return Revenge of the Sith has slowly become my favorite. It's because it's my son's favorite. Dude, talking negatively was what draws views, but I learned quickly that I didn't want that attention or audience. Yeah. Rating scales are broken internationally. I used to love TFA. The moment when it fully faded was a Disney Plus watch in 2020, and I realized how bad it was. Yeah. Deep down, what people hate is the system of nepotism that is masked by postmodernism. You become a parasite. I don't know if that's me being a parasite, but there was a whole class of YouTubers that they just talked about Star Wars politics for 6 months. And they made a lot of money with it, you know. I mean, I'm not going to knock them. They're like, okay, Robot wants me to say these things, so I'll say them. But you got to have a little bit more creative impulse besides that. You know, I like to write books. I like to make music, and that's what I want to do. You know, I want to make things. I don't just want to talk about other people's movies. I want to make the things that are great. Avengers Doomsday is going to fail hardcore, but people keep trying to stay on the Marvel wagon. The Marvel wagon lost its wheels with Endgame. And I said, you know, if I were Kevin Feige, is that how you say his name? I always thought it was Feige. I'm so stupid. But like, anyway, if I was Kevin Feige, I would retire. Like, go out on top, dude. You will be remembered as the guy. The Hardwick will point out that like he was really reined in by other people when MCU was good, but you'll be remembered as the guy who made the greatest film franchise of all time, and no one will take that away. But what's going to happen is Marvel is going to shit into the dirt, and you'll be remembered as the guy who drove Marvel into the ground. It's why Bob Iger really shouldn't have come back to Disney. It's like, you want to be remembered as the guy who brought Disney to its peak, not as the guy who drove it into the ground. Yeah. But Endgame, I didn't dislike Endgame. I thought Endgame was great for what it was. It wasn't a movie. It was a capstone experience for all of the movies. It was like a theme park experience almost. It was something for the fans to close out that entire cycle of the MCU. And it did it beautifully and wonderfully. And it did a fantastic job with that. I think to even call Endgame a movie, it's the last Marvel movie, right? It's the end of the Marvel franchise. It feels like it nails it. It does it all the way across the board. Boom, closes off that entire cycle. That's what you should do. Watch MCU, watch all the movies in release order up to that one, and then never watch another one. And then you're going to make a great 20 movie run. That's an amazing run when you think about it. And it was perfect for what it was. You know. So the first Avengers, I went in thinking it would be stupid because I think superhero movies are mostly stupid, and I generally have low expectations. And I actually really enjoyed what Joss Whedon did with it. I actually really enjoyed the movie. So, the lame jokes, to me, that was always part of like comic books, and they just did them kind of well. You know, the little quippy jokes, the little comic relief everywhere, where they're basically comedy action movies. I think it works. Whenever I make videos about movies, I often talk about stuff I enjoy. I found if I talk about a movie that's good, positive review gets 1,500 views, negative review gets 5,000. So you're just encouraged to watch bad movies and seethe all the time. That's not good for your soul or your heart. I want to watch good movies that I'm excited about, that I can like share with people and just communicate what's great about them. I'm hard pressed to watch Waterworld. The tangible production will probably wow me, but not a fan of Kevin Costner. Waterworld's pretty cool looking back. It's stupid. It's really stupid. But Dennis Hopper owns that movie. Dennis Hopper makes that movie good. He really does. It's all about Dennis Hopper. Truly. Dennis Hopper, I feel like there's a lot of these actors, especially from that past generation, who through their very presence can elevate a movie and just sort of save it. I think you like the screen presence that's there. This is one of my complaints about like Captain Marvel was like Brie Larson has just really weak screen presence. She just doesn't carry any energy on screen. And so if you stick her in a scene with a Samuel L. Jackson or somebody who has this energy on screen, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for her. You know, she just doesn't have the energy. Dennis Hopper kind of rules the screen. He can just command what's going on there. And so I think he saves the movie as far as like how it's a funny movie. There's a lot of good jokes. Kevin Costner plays this very, very straight character. And it works because he's just this like almost silent protagonist. And Dennis Hopper is the funny guy. Infinity War Endgame was carried by Thanos. And there are so few decently crafted villains in modern film. Yeah. I still think Thanos was a terribly crafted villain. I have a whole video on why his entire motivation in the movies was really retarded. And it is. It's really stupid. It's based on really outdated ideas of population from Thomas Robert Malthus, who it's like Malthus observed. You'll see people say this. I'm like, Malthus observed nothing. He never observed anything. He just crafted his theory out of nothing. And it had a lot of effect. This idea that people breed geometrically. But when we actually look at the data of how people reproduce, they don't. Right? Which is why we have a crisis in the first world, is people don't just have babies endlessly. In fact, the amount of children that people have is highly variable to outside influences. Noblemen had few children, whereas peasants might have 20, and then that might shift around. People control their reproduction, it turns out. So Thomas Robert Malthus was really stupid. But even then, if you take everything for granted, killing half of the people in the universe means that you have postponed this struggle by 30 years, because that's how long it takes for the population to double. So there you go. A random comedy would get 15 drafts back in the day. Now they start production without a script. Yes, thank you. So this is a thing that I learned when I was in Hollywood, is that they would really do. I mean, I did tons of revisions of my own scripts that I felt like made them worse, but was more to what the production company wanted. And you would do this. You'd have sometimes 20 revisions of a script before you would shoot. And then now they just kind of, and you can see it with Force Awakens. It's like they started shooting with this story about Luke. And I remember an interview with Jar Jar Abrams where he said that. He's like, oh, we had this whole thing with Luke, and then we kind of decided that it would be better to go with Rey, which basically meant that Kathleen Kennedy said, no, Rey needs to be the thing. Don't have Luke upstaging her. And so they did. They just abandoned the whole Find Luke thing, but they'd already shot that stuff and kind of started the post-production on it. So they just kind of changed to the Death Star plot halfway through. So the first half of Force Awakens is one movie with one MacGuffin. The second half of Force Awakens is just a totally different movie with a totally different plot and totally different goals and everything, right? It's just, they're just two non-sequential movies happening. It's really bad. But anyway, yeah. Endgame is such a watered down doomsday Marvel villain who just happens to be Thanos. Revenge of the Sith this year reminded me why I used to like Star Wars and apologetically enjoyed the prequels. Yeah. I like episode 2 a lot. I'm like an episode 2 lover. I think episode 2 is actually really good. I don't really like episode 1 still, but episode 1 does get carried by its amazing aesthetics. Maybe some people's lives are so miserable they feel an attachment to media that saves them. This is true. They're attached to what they can be attached to make them feel safe and good and like there's positive things. And I don't hate them for that. I really don't. Other than they torment me. Right. Gen Y, unless you're a cusper, that's synonymous with millennial. So I've gone over this many times. Welcome to the channel. Gen Y is 80s. We've already defined this multiple times over. If you're Gen X, so I'll give you all the generations. Boomers are like late 40s into 50s. You have Jones, which is basically the 60s. Gen X, 70s. Gen Y, 80s. Millennial, 90s. Gen Z is going to be people born in the 2000s or thereabouts, right? These aren't hard lines. These are about experiences and cultural, the ethos of the culture. And then last gen, or what do we call it? Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha would be like 2010. So like my kids are Gen Alpha. Okay. So we don't have to think of them because there's no hard generation. It's not like there's a generation born and no one's born. Everybody's born all the time. So it's about what experience you have. So if you're born in the 80s, you have an analog childhood, you predate the internet, you meaningfully remember the world before 9/11. If you're a millennial, you're born in the 90s, you have no memory of a pre-internet world. So you have no analog memory. You don't clearly remember life before 9/11. If you are a Gen Zer, 9/11 happened usually before you were born, or like you were maybe a baby, right? For the Gen Y experience, let's say. So you just don't remember 9/11. You don't remember that you used to be able to just get on an airplane. You could show up to the airport like 15 minutes and like get on an airplane. You could, you just don't remember what life was like before 9/11. You've had war your entire life. Your entire life has been war, which is really crappy. And then your entire life has been economic crises as a Gen Zer or as a millennial, right? As someone born in the 80s, I really remember the pre-Obama economy and how strong it was and how easy it was to make money and how cheap it was to live. My health insurance before Obama was $60 a month. I could live in an apartment for $300 a month, and I could gig 4 nights a week and have enough money to pay for all of my expenses, gas, car insurance, everything, and have enough money left over to like drink myself into oblivion every night if I wanted to. Okay. That economic excess, just, you're not going to remember it as a millennial. You're just not going to remember what it was like to be really rich easily, to like easily afford everything. The Clinton economy, you're just not going to remember it. Gen X remembers it really well, but Gen X also, that's like the latchkey generation. Mine's the daycare generation. Millennials are daycare generation too. They had daycare, but my generation was like, you're going to go to daycare. And my, older kids born in the 1973, let's say, like my friend Jesse, who did this artwork behind me, did the cover of King Leper. He's a little older than me. So he's like in his 50s now. It's like, latchkey. You just went home from school and no one was there, which is weird. I have some memories of that. So really, when we talk about our generations, and I've talked about this many times with other writers, we've written books about it, so you can read them. In fact, I'll find a couple books for you to read about Generation Y and all these things. Let me find one. Let's see if J.D. Cowan still has this book that I wrote with him and Brian Niemeyer up. Yes, here it is. I'm going to link it in the chat. Boom. And I'll give you another one. This is my literary fiction anthology for people that are around my age, or people who would like to understand the people who were born in the 80s, the people who fought global war on terror, the people who did that kind of stuff. $5 pitcher of beer, someone mentions. Yes. And then I got a super chat for $5 from Zimamaro. Thank you. I feel that people are so eager to feel smart. They're eager to find dumb stuff in movies and point them out with any thought as if to make it sense. Yeah. So that's one way that people feel smart, is they attack others for being dumb rather than having a profound thought. I think it's much harder to have a profound thought than it is to poke holes or to like find blame. And I will connect this to my musical experience as well, which is, let me find here. Let's say I play a concert. There's 2 kinds of audience members. I play a piece. I have people come up and be like, I was crying at this piece. This was so beautiful. You're amazing. And you have other people that will snigger because there was nail clicks in some song, or I missed a note, or I broke the sound of my guitar, right? Like they're remembering, they come to the concert to look for the 10 mistakes that I'm going to make because they are a guitarist themselves. And so they want to feel good about themselves. Meanwhile, they never play a gig. And I realize this. So one of the reasons I hate classical guitar is I hate the culture of classical guitar. It's a culture of where most of what they do is for other guitarists. And so they're terrified of playing with any kind of passion. They're terrified of doing anything new. And they're also are constantly looking to tear down other people, to find any mistake. And there's always mistakes in live playing. It's why there's this, I guess there's a cadre of people that really hate Elliot Fisk and think he sucks. Elliot Fisk is one of the best guitar players I can think of. Does he break the sound of his guitar? Yes. He attacks his guitar like it owes him money. Does he make mistakes? He makes mistakes. But he plays new music like every year. He's not playing the same crap. Every time you go to see Elliot Fisk, you're going to see new pieces that you haven't heard him play before. He knows more repertoire than anyone I can think of. And he has an understanding of the passion of the music better than almost any guitar player that I've ever talked to or ever done a masterclass with. Elliot Fisk, just hanging out with Elliot Fisk taught me a lot about guitar that most people miss. And there's people who hate Elliot Fisk because he is an artist and he's not a person that's super concerned with avoiding every little detail that's wrong. Many of the things that are bad about classical guitar are kind of a flaw with the way the instrument's designed itself. And I'll make some separate content on this later. It's why my current focus is actually archtop guitar. Because with archtop guitar, I can avoid virtually all of those problems and produce a better sound. But for some reason, we decided classical guitar should be the Spanish guitar with these wound strings and these nylon strings and should be played in a certain way. And so, yeah, there's people who will go to a concert and you can actually play perfectly. And then they'll be, and I've had this with like master classes where they're like, well, you know, you were like repeated a finger here. And I'm like, okay, but did the scale sound perfect? Yes. Okay, I dragged a finger. For somehow in practice, I figured out that to play this passage, I drag a finger. To me, I don't give a shit about that. If you drag a finger. And bass players don't. Bass players drag fingers all the time, and no one cares because they didn't have the classical guitar culture telling them you have to strictly alternate I and M no matter what. And if you ever drag a finger, because it's actually easier to drag a finger than it is to reach behind and play like playing cross string with one finger that's longer than the other is a problem. So sometimes it's easier to drag a finger if you can do it. But, you know, that's a flaw. And so that means you suck at guitar. And I realized the people who are really critical of my playing are people who've never gigged, people who can't play, people who know one song. There's just this whole like element of classical guitar people that they never challenge themselves, and they never perform because they're never capable of doing it. They never push themselves to do it. They're too afraid. They're terrified. They're terrified that someone might think the way that they think, which is to tear everybody down. They're going to tear me down. They're going to give me a 1-star review. Man, being an independent artist, I learned really quickly how to deal with 1-star reviews, which is like, some people are stupid and don't get what you're doing. You know, you can have a flawless book. Someone's going to give it a 1-star review. You know, it's going to happen, right? They still ship, Brandon Sanderson books ship with typos. I find typos in Harry Potter. Okay. You know, these little things to a normal person, they don't even pick up on them. They don't care about them. But to certain people, they're looking for that, you know. Where were we? Missed a lot of this. I feel the same way for Halo Reach you do feel for Revenge of the Sith. I never played Halo Reach. George Lucas is over Star Wars. He enjoys the movies he did, but overall he's done with Star Wars and wants to go on with his life, spending more time with his family, doing other things. I appreciate that. You were right about most things, but I could think of 2 things you were wrong. Masks working to slow the spread of COVID and Donald Trump being in jail by now. Well, we didn't, you know, I did think Donald Trump, I was like, they tried to put Donald Trump in jail. They definitely did try to put Donald Trump in jail. So the COVID mask thing was something that Nassim Taleb pointed out, which is that even at 50% effectiveness, they would reduce the transmission by 90%. So they obviously weren't 50% effective. I think there was probably more to COVID than just the masks thing. People were double masking. Eventually it became a religious thing. Like, I'm masking to protect myself. I think if you'd had 100% masks, you might have had slower transmission, but, you know, we did all that stuff. I wore gloves. People were going to the store with like goggles to try to avoid getting COVID. My family still got it. How'd they get it? My son got it like off the playground. Because I wasn't going to make my kids do that. I wasn't going to subject my kids to that kind of shit, you know? I was going to let them be happy. Let them be happy, you know? I liked Rogue One enough. Halo Reach was the better story for that kind of dour, bleak narrative it was going for. Empire Strikes Back set the bar for a sequel. I walked out of the theater wanting to see what happens next. Well, they definitely gave you like a kind of a literal cliffhanger, huh? Like Luke was like hanging on a cliff. He fell off the cliff. But it's like, well, now there's all these things we have to have kind of resolved. Yeah, I liked Return of the Jedi a lot. Guillermo del Toro said AI will never be as good as humans because humans will always add in something new from themselves, even if it's something adapted many times before, like his Frankenstein. I think that's a great perspective. I think there's more to it than that, but I think that's a great way of looking at it. I still think it's one step removed from the fact is the artist is what matters about the art. The artist is really critical to the art. So it is, yeah, he's correct. They add something new from themselves. So it's not just about the product existing in this vacuum. That's the way corporations like to think about Star Wars or any other product, a game. It's a product that exists for people to buy and consume. And so our goal is to make the product that people want. And the product is viewed as this kind of object, kind of independent from the people who make it. But art doesn't work that way. Art has the self in it. That's why Revenge of the Sith is so good, right? And it's why Guillermo del Toro is right. Like an AI is not going to accomplish what a human can, because the human makes countless decisions when he's making art that have to do with what he wants to communicate and what he wants to see. So a great artist drawing on a real piece of paper or something, he's making many tiny decisions. The AI is not really making decisions. It's sort of just doing we could call it a decision engine in a way, but it's not thinking about the AI can't want things. The artist can't want something. The artist can't think and imagine. And the artist can want things. The artist can think and imagine what they're going for. The artist can put it in context of everything else. They can understand why this detail matters to the whole. And AI just doesn't do that. The AI, they just don't work that way. Our large language models just work a different way. So Guillermo del Toro's right. It's the center of the artist. So I would take it one step further and be like, the art is really about the artist. It's what the artist is trying to show you and to communicate to you. It's not a product in a vacuum that exists outside of itself. It doesn't exist outside of the artist. It can't. It's part of the artist. While the sets of the original may not look as great as, say, the prequels, the story, the characters, and the world are well done. I think so. I think the original trilogy, it's really about the characters. It's a smaller story in a lot of ways, and the prequels are kind of a bigger story. They feel more galactic. But it's still mostly about the characters. And so when I realized that, complaints about why isn't Grievous built up better? I'm like, yeah, I probably would have built up Grievous more, but Grievous is not really the central character. Grievous is a side character that exists for Obi-Wan and for these other characters to have some conflict with, because it's not actually about Obi-Wan versus Grievous. It's really about what Obi-Wan and Anakin are doing together, if that makes any sense. It's about Anakin's fall. Dances with Wolves did it better, yeah. Avatar is amazing to people who've never seen a good computer game. I remember thinking that the Shivering Isles in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was aesthetically more interesting than Avatar. Now, Avatar is obviously higher fidelity and, but Shivering Isles looks really cool. Avatar, Fire and Ash. Oh boy, it's coming. I dislike Cameron's commentary on the Avatar films. Humans are bad. Did Return of the Jedi set the bar? I like Return of the Jedi a lot. At the time, Return of the Jedi did set the bar. It ended the trilogy. The Avatar movies really show James Cameron's shortcomings as a writer. There's a fan-made deepfake project that fixed the Tarkin and Leia effects and made them look vastly more real. That's interesting. The Vader scene pisses me off. Jingly, jangly keys look shiny. Yeah, it doesn't serve any purpose. It's just tacked on for fan service. I know we usually think of fan service as like girls' panties in anime, but the broader meaning of fans want to see this, therefore we show it to them. It doesn't have a purpose, right? Just like how a character looking up and seeing the panties doesn't really serve a purpose to any kind of story. It's just for fans to be to see a butt, I hate this so much. People who complain about this clearly don't understand basic engineering. I think we're talking about the vent in the vent in the Death Star, the tiny vent. It made total sense. No one cared about this, right? It was just it was like responding to a turbo nerd accusation that the almighty powerful Empire wouldn't put a ventilation shaft to vent to their nuclear gas or something. There would be no tailpipe. Revenge of the Sith really shows exactly what George Lucas always wanted Star Wars to be, all the way back in 1977. And he got to finally have the Star Wars film he wanted the first time around. Yeah. You can read the original script. I recommend, if you can get access to it. I don't have it uploaded anywhere that you can read it, but you can read the original script from 1975, and it's really interesting. It's a very interesting read. Anyone who's like a student of film, I think, should read that, because you'll find so many of the elements in the other movies are there. They have the Jawas attack the Death Star, which are basically Ewoks. They're like monkey creatures, though. Attack the Death Star, which is interesting. There are some fan edits that improve Rogue One, but none of them turn it into the director's cut, since the footage to do so is not available to the public. Yeah, I would love a director's cut, and I think Disney could just like sell that and make some money. That would be cool, you know. Disney should re-release all their horrible Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and just attach the Rogue One Vader scene at the end so people gush over the new improved remastering. I haven't watched any of the Star Wars shows. I only watched the first season of Mandalorian, and I did some content on it kind of leading up, and then after I was gonna say I'm gonna have a 1-year hiatus from talking about Star Wars after Rise of Skywalker, and I just didn't talk about it again. So maybe I'll do some more Star Wars content at some point, you know, just for fun, for the people who are still around. Rogue One has the crowning achievement of making a major expository character have a heavy non-English accent. Ike Perlmutter, thank you, Hardwick. He reined Feige in until Feige and Iger ousted him in 2015. Yeah, so like, but Feige could have been remembered as the guy who like made the MCU. And now he'll be remembered as the guy who ran it into the ground. Same thing with Iger. Bob Iger will be remembered as the guy who ran Disney into the shithole. Not to shit on Return of the... Okay, you guys are talking about that. It's a separate conversation. I refuse to see Endgame. Infinity War serves as a capstone enough for me. When YouTubers go to see movies they know they won't like just to do the review for the views or money and their feeders, sucking from creatives and their YouTube audience. If I had an easier way to do movie reviews, I would have just made this a movie review channel. But because I'm married with children, I can't go to the movies. Maybe I could have pirated them from Russian stream sites or something. I don't know. But that's just too much for me. I don't want to spend for me to go to the movie theater, it takes like 3 to 4 hours out of my life that I have to be able to, like my wife has to be okay with me being gone. And so it's work. It's work for me to go to the movie, and then I better be making money from it, because otherwise I could be doing something that makes money, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, you don't watch Waterworld for Kevin Costner. You watch it for Hopper. Return of the Jedi was the wrap-up. Made me feel like watching the first 2 movies was worth my time. Yeah, I think so. Return of the Jedi closed all the loops, you know? Closed all the loops. My favorite MCU movie is still Captain America: First Avenger, since it does such a good job of recapturing the style and spirit of that type of 30s to 40s serials, pulps, etc. Very fond of it. Yeah. It's not whether or not Thanos was wrong. It's could you believe Thanos would believe that? Thank you. I don't believe he would be stupid enough as this super being to believe that. That's really what it is. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. All right. You got me sold on the hops in Waterworld. Yeah. I do enjoy Phantom Menace still. I enjoy lots of things about Phantom Menace. Liam Neeson helps the movie. He's basically what the Jedi should be. A well-trained and disciplined, but doesn't fully advocate Jedi dogma and bends the rules. Yeah, I think he's great. I think there's a lot of great things to love about the movie. And there's things that are kind of cringy that just... If you're trying to be comedic and it doesn't land, then it gives you this weird feeling of like... Man, I had a word for it, but I lost the word, you know. Someone wrote about how in the 80s he was depressed and going to unalive himself, but he got hooked watching Doctor Who on PBS and kept postponing it so he could see the next episode. I've heard of this. People were like, you know, I decided not to kill myself because I knew that there was a third Mass Effect game coming. You could see the flaw in attaching yourself to that. But by the time it comes out, your life has improved enough that you no longer care. Anything that can get you to that next day to where like your life could potentially improve is okay. You know, if Doctor Who gets you to not to not do that, then that's great. You know, but hopefully if he goes on long enough, then you don't need Doctor Who anymore, that part withers away like an appendix or something. $5 pitcher of beer. We used to get $3 pitchers of beer, bro. $3. It was a special at, where was it? We went to like the Roadhouse. We had $3 pitchers of Bud Light, which is nasty, but it was $3. And we would get a pitcher each. We'd all drink a pitcher. You know, economy is so weak. McDonald's had to come out with a commercial about a kid bragging to him mom that McDonald's money now. My sister and I were latchkey kids, saying how much safer some places were back then. Yeah. So this is the thing that I make about housing costs. So the boomers kind of misunderstand the way that housing costs have gone. It's not just that housing costs have gone up. It's that if you are, say, a millennial, and you remember like the 90s and 2000s being safe for you, to have that same safety, you have to buy a bigger house than your parents did, believe it or not. So yeah, if you grew up in any of those times, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s was when it started to get disrupted, but you could safely go to school. You could walk down the street without being worried about your kids being, someone tried to like abduct someone on my street, and I live in a pretty nice neighborhood. So it's really hard to escape that. But in order to have that safety, you have to buy a bigger house. You have to live in the gated community. You have to buy more house because it's the only way to buy away from the low rent people. The low rent people who make everything worse. The low rent people who deal drugs out of their backyard, who cook meth. If you don't want to live next to the meth cooker, you have to spend more on your house. If you don't want your kids to be beat up on the way to school for being white, you have to buy a nicer house in an area with more white people and less racial tension. You have to pay more. You have to pay more for the same lifestyle you had as a kid with your boomer parents, because even though they made, maybe if we're adjusting for inflation, it doesn't work out quite the same way, but it's like they could buy a $100,000 house and be in a nice neighborhood because everybody in that neighborhood was just like them. And everyone was the same. So it was safe. So to have that same safety for your kids, you have to buy a bigger house. You have to buy a $500,000 house. Even though that $100,000 house is now $300,000, you have to buy a $500,000 house because that's the only way to get away from the low rent people. The low rent people now live in those old neighborhoods, and yeah, they're gonna beat up your kids on the way to school, steal from them, or have your catalytic converter stolen out of your driveway, all that kind of stuff. You have to pay more. You got to pay more. You got to pay the piper. You wore the mask to protect others, supposedly. We didn't know why we were wearing the masks, but I wore the mask. I was basically buying and delivering food for old people when the shit hit the fan for COVID, right? So I was going to the store and delivering all of this food for old people who couldn't leave the house because they would die. Like, these are people in like actually bad health. And then eventually I got sick, and it was pretty bad. I would say COVID was one of the worst like respiratory illnesses I've ever had in my life. It was really bad. I recommend you don't get COVID. But by the time the next year happened, like, people would get COVID and they were just not even sick. Whereas like that first wave was bad. I think the virus got way less bad as time went on. Yeah, AI can't make anything meaningfully entirely autonomously. It can't. But even in conjunction with human input, you're missing the way the humans think about the details. The details of the shape of the nose if they're drawing, or like how many, like humans think about a lot more details, and they put their heart into the details, believe it or not. If you wrote the Matrix today, humans would be enslaved by AI to form them for their original ideas for training the super AI. Grievous was fleshed out in the Star Wars animated shorts. Yes, I really like those. He was way more menacing in those. He was kind of a goofball in Revenge of the Sith, but yeah. But I don't think you should have to watch those to understand a movie. That's my thought. There's an interesting subtext in the first Avatar film with the main character being paralyzed from the waist down and getting a new body to walk in, and how he's looked up looking up physically at other characters until he gets the new alien body. Then he sees from their level from then on. But the text doesn't really support this all that well. That's an interesting thought. He's physically taller and looking down on people. When Avatar was made, the main character was the computer graphics. The last Matrix movie had the undertones of people are happy in the Matrix and choose to stay there. They're like, the Matrix is a thing that you can cultivate. It was weird. I didn't like the fourth Matrix movie. I did a review of it. I didn't like it, but I can't remember it all that well because I just don't think it was that good. Never liked the character designs in Avatar. I didn't like them too much either. A turbo nerd would understand what an exhaust port is. It's also funny how some of the names were too, like Obi-Wan was originally Mace Windy. And it was Windy, not Windu. There's also like, I'm trying to remember what the original guy's name was, like Justin Lightbringer or something in that 75 draft. I've been making a game for 1 year, used AI for some of the asset generation. I see two AI camps, one where it's software tool towards a bigger goal, others where it owns the output, example books. Yeah. So if you make an AI book, it's just, you're not writing, right? Versus you like using AI to edit the book. Like you can use Grammarly or some AI thing to be like, this sentence, you should do it this way. And then you can, as a human, look at that sentence and be like, yes or no. And make decisions about those things. So I think AI editing is a great tool. That's the thing that you should farm out to robots, is like finding the mistakes, not writing the prose and deciding the sentences. That's opposite. I'm editing the AI. No, you write and let the AI edit. It's backwards. So here's what I would do with games. And I've thought about this. I've thought about doing this for a visual novel, is using AI to generate all the assets for the initial programming of the story and the initial programming of the game. And then once you have it in a minimum playable state, then you can hire an artist to replace some of those assets with things that are better. So like, let's say for visual novel, you use AI to make a bunch of the characters and you just kind of get the product there. And then you hire an artist, like, here's my mock-up, here's all the stuff I need, and, design some characters and let's do it. So then once you have the minimum product and you can kind of present that, maybe even crowdfund the money that you would pay the artist, then you can hire the artist to like do better assets for you. There's a lot of things I could see like AI being useful for games. Like, do you need an artist to make a tree texture? Probably not. Do you need an artist to make a bark texture? Like, AI would be great for like, I need a bark texture. Boy, you didn't hire an artist to do that. And I hired the artist to design the characters. And I use the AI to make bark textures and grass textures. And I use the AI to make the river rocks. And I use that, right? Like, I use the AI to make the mountain, the distant mountain. I use the AI to make a skybox. Yeah, you can have an artist do that, and maybe you want to pay for that detail with that. But like, if you were choosing where to spend your money, I would probably want to spend my money on. But you could also just buy those assets, like from the asset store, the Unity asset store, the Unreal Engine asset store, whatever. You can just buy those assets. But you can use AI to make those assets so that they're a little different, and then hire the artist to like, I want you to design the characters and the animations and. Yeah, I could see I see like lots of uses for this stuff. People think I'm more anti-AI than I am. It's mostly that people are really dishonest about AI. They make an AI book, and the whole point of making the AI book is to pretend to be an author. No, don't pretend. Just don't pretend. Just be honest with whatever you're doing. Okay, that's all. And the fact is, they don't want to be honest because they know if they were honest, this book is AI. People wouldn't buy it. You only get people to buy it if you can convince them that it's not AI. Because they don't want to buy it. Why would they pay for something that should be free? It's valueless. AI art, especially like AI images, are literally worthless. For Star Wars shows, I hear Andor is pretty good. Not that I'm watching it. I don't watch Star Wars anymore. Yeah, I didn't watch Andor. There's an ambitious fan edit of The Mandalorian by Akbagel that fixes a lot of the bad writing by cutting dumb things out and creating new dialogues with AI. Interesting. It even removes Baby Yoda from season 3. That's cool, I guess. For pirating modern movies, it's usually subsidized by Indian casinos, from what I understand. What? I don't recommend it. I don't do it. Modern movies are like Disney Star Wars to me. I'm burnt out. And so here's the main reason you don't give money to people who hate you is for you. It's like in Brian's book, right? So free your attention. Your attention is a commodity that you spend. You pay attention to someone. You're paying out your attention. So let's say you're going to pirate a movie to watch it. Sorry. The 2 hours that you spend watching that movie could be spent doing something else. You could attend to a different activity that you might enjoy more. You know, you're still giving them your attention. You're still paying attention to Disney even if you're not paying them money. So it's better to pay them something else if you can. And we went through this. Like, it's one of the reasons that I stopped making a lot of Star Wars content is like, that is a way to make money. And that's fine. You know, it is a way to make money. But Brand X, we started calling it Brand X. I think this was Raul Nyanzi came up with this. He's a writer. And, you know, Brand X. We're not even going to mention the name Star Wars. We're just going to call it Brand X because we don't want, people need to move past this. And like the black pill is that people are not going to move past it, man. They will watch the crappy Star Wars shows until they die, you know, demented in the old folks home. That's what Mad Uncle Marty in the Gen Y book is all about. I'll link Mad Uncle Marty. I have a free audiobook of Mad Uncle Marty. It's what Mad Uncle Marty's about. It's the Gen Y guy in the old folks home who's demented. Yeah. Just imagine how many lives have been saved by people waiting for Half-Life 3. Gaben can't leave Half-Life unfinished. For God's sake, the last game left us on a cliffhanger and teased the new interesting thing. To live the free life, it's not about how much money you can spill, but how much is in your wallet. The little spoken of the rule. I lost my career over COVID. I'm pissed at the propaganda. A lot of people had, you know, for me, I made this thing. I was like, it's not that different for me because I homeschool my kids and like people got upset about that. I was like, I was pretty lucky to like just be able to not have my life change that much because of COVID. I mean, that'll probably be another generational divide is like people who remember COVID, babies who were COVID, like COVID babies, people who were kids, like elementary school kids when COVID was there and they were subjected to having to wear masks and all that kind of stuff, like constantly because of a virus like no children had died of COVID. So the people who really, you didn't need to worry about were the kids. My son was sick for literally half a day. And that was like the strong version of the virus. You know what I mean? It's kind of insane what we subjected kids to because of a virus that really had zero chance of hurting them at all. It was mostly like old people, right? Same thing with the flu. You have things like Metroid Prime 4 introducing side characters that have horrendously written dialogue, and you have to wonder if the writers have any self-awareness about how bad the writing is. I don't think they do. So I call it the Hollywood bubble. People live in Hollywood, and if you've never lived in LA, I lived in LA. People there are crazy and they don't understand anyone else that's from outside of their geographic area. They live in a little bubble and they think that anyone who doesn't think like them should be murdered. They actually think this is why they murder people like Charlie Kirk. They actually think you should be dead. They'll say it. If they think that you're one of them, they'll say it. Like, someone should just kill this guy. They routinely talk about that. They live in a bubble where they can't understand that anyone could have a different opinion from them. They have zero empathy. Their empathy is completely wrecked. I mean real empathy, not emotional projection. They think of themselves as the empathetic ones, but they have no idea what other people are thinking. They can't conceive of a person thinking a different thought from them. So they live in that bubble. And so they don't understand that their writing is shit because they don't understand what normal people think. They just can't conceive of it. They have no empathy. No, not Starkiller. He was called like Lightbringer in like, that was a different draft. There's all these different drafts. So the 75 draft, I think he's called Justin Lightbringer, right? And I think he's called Starkiller later. George Lucas's early Star Wars draft featuring Mace Windu was directly plagiarized from Edgar Rice Burroughs, a fighting man of Mars, copying entire sentences word for word with names changed. Beatles Anthology 4 comes out Friday with some cool Helter Skelter outtake. Cool, I guess. I'm not big on the Beatles. There are some professional animators I've talked to who have admitted AI has been used for longer than people think to outsource tiny processes like making tree bark textures. Personally, I don't have a huge problem with that. Like, when I think of that, I'm like, that seems like a good use for generative AIs to like make a texture. Like, should we have an artist spend a whole day making a texture, or should we have an artist like making the face, making the animations? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm welcome to like have anybody tell me something otherwise, or like give me a different opinion. Try to convince me that you shouldn't use it even for bark textures. My main thing is I don't know if it's necessary for bark textures. I think maybe people just don't notice it that much. ChatGPT is good for editing for grammar. Yeah, it caught several typos. In like the Emperor's Castle. It wasn't like in the Death Star. And eventually they put it on a new Death Star because they felt like they needed something for the other characters to do. Even the third Matrix movie ended with the implications that Neo was making the Matrix a better place to live rather than ending it. Dark City did something similar. Well, Dark City was cool, but there was no like redemption in Dark City. There was nowhere to go to. I got into the woods and take pictures for grass, bark, and rock textures. It's very inefficient, but it's a lot of fun and very enjoyable. Yeah. I recently watched an indie short film made with real actors but AI locations. The story was about one of the few actors left working after AI has replaced most actors. It was pretty good. Only thing that will bring me back to Star Wars is an Amanaman series? I don't know what that is. Have you seen the new Brand? Do you think Steam goes belly up when Gaben eventually steps down? Or will his kids potentially run it with dad's vision? It's hard to say. I think whenever a business is corporatized and becomes publicly traded, it's about extracting value from things. So any kind of brand value, you're looking to extract the value of that brand. That's what Disney did with Star Wars, with Marvel. It's looking to extract the investment. Like the public, you can think of the public perception and love of a brand. And I have an article coming out tomorrow morning, so make sure you subscribe to my Substack. I've got an article coming out in a couple hours about this. The perception of a brand is like a value thing that you then can draw on. You can extract things from it. So you want to protect your brand because things that diminish the brand means people are less likely to buy the brand thing later on. So, Disney was looking to extract value from brands, not purely to develop them. To get the value out of what they paid for. They paid $5 billion for Star Wars and they want to get a return on that investment. That's different from what an artist thinks about. An artist thinks of things differently. Really differently. They think about what they're trying to communicate. If that makes any sense. All right, I missed a bunch of stuff. I think a whopping 2 kids died from COVID, but they had comorbidities. And it's the same thing with almost everybody else who was an adult who died. They had several other comorbidities. It was a really bad flu. And having had it as a really healthy adult in good shape with generally low body fat and I exercised every single day and I'm not the most fit guy in the world, but I was pretty darn healthy. And I had the worst bronchitis I've ever had after that. I was coughing up blood and stuff. So it was really bad. The inflammation, it wasn't the initial one was 3 days of fever, which was uncomfortable, but it was everything that came afterwards. That was really bad. So it was definitely one of the worst things I've experienced was that after infection. But, I can see from having had that, how an old person who's got diabetes, kill someone with COPD easily. Somebody who has some other comorbidity, it'll kill them really, really easily, I think. Where was I? I expect Steam to fail when Gabe's out of the picture. Yeah, they'll probably just try to extract the value from it, raise the prices as much as possible, try to maximize the amount of throughput. It's kind of like Amazon. It's you're trying to extract the value from the brand. I had similar ideas of artists for core assets, but for small stuff, a button texture. AI is surprisingly good. Yeah, copyright morals aside. That's a deeper question, is like, should the AIs be paying people out for using their material to develop their AI? I don't know. I think the Metroid 4 writers do know how bad it sounds. I think it either doesn't matter to them or they do it on purpose to own the chuds. There's a recent video of Jennifer Lawrence talking about how she stopped talking about politics because she realized it doesn't change how anyone votes and just alienates potential audience members. I saw Jack White was like, bad, Trump voters bad, Orange man bad. If you like Trump, don't come to my concerts. Okay. Yeah, I wish more people would think that way. I would love to not talk about politics and just write books. I really would. That's kind of why I regret talking about Star Wars. It'd be a smaller audience, but it'd be more peace. You know, it's a quiet life. It'd have 5,000 subscribers, but it'd be peaceful. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right. I think that's it. I'm out of time. It's 2 hours. I talked for 2 hours. Thanks for listening. Let me link everything again. I linked my Substack. New article coming out tomorrow. It is on what I call the Chibson dilemma. The Chinese Gibson. Fake products. It's about what's the problem with fake products. So please do check that out. That's coming out tomorrow. Let me link some books. King Leper is out. Here's Gen Y. Here's the Gen Y book. Both Gen Y books. So mine, which is all literary fiction collection. Gen Y, which is a lot of essays on people on our generation born in the 80s and that experience and what's wrong with our generation. This is one of those things people are like, boomers don't like it when you complain about boomers. I'm like, no one's as hard on my generation as I am. Really hard on my generation. I really want people of my generation, and this was a lot of my thoughts with the 30s, is like, guys, you got to grow up. You can't be Peter Pan. Major Peter Pan problems with people born in the 80s and 90s for sure. If there's one thing that kind of sticks the 80s and 90s kids together, it's the Peter Pans. I'll raise the price in a little bit. I feel like it should be $5. $5 is good. Or you can buy the paperback for $9.99. That has an AI cover, by the way. That's an AI cover back when AI came out. So just so you know, that is actually an AI cover. But I wasn't expecting anyone to buy the book, so I might redo the cover with non-AI, and I could show you guys how I'm going to do that. Actually, be kind of fun. It actually be a cover that I've used for some of my music, so I'll probably do that. Maybe that'll be fun. That'll be a fun way to kind of just do something visual. Let's do like a non-AI cover for it, kind of update that book, kind of get that going. What else is I going to link? Substack, get on the list. Get on the list. You get a free book about AI, about demons and AI, demonic AI. No. You like this one? Here's a classical guitar. Let's do classical guitar. Here's some classical guitar. Thanks, guys. We'll see you all next time.